The Blackwood Forest had claimed 17 people in the last decade. Search and rescue coordinator Sarah Chen knew those woods better than anyone, which is why Marcus Kane's disappearance terrified her. Kane wasn't some weekend hiker. He was a decorated marine tracker with 20 years of wilderness experience and an uncanny ability to read the forest like most people read books. When his emergency beacon went silent at 3:47 p.m., Sarah launched the largest search operation in the county's history. 12 hours later, Kane walked out of the tree line. But he wasn't alone. The creature beside him stood 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur, with muscles that rippled beneath its hide. Its elongated snout revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth, and its massive paws left claw marks in the dirt. Most unsettling of all, both Kane and the beast shared the same piercing amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dying light. Kane raised his hand as the search team reached for their weapons. "Easy," he said, his voice somehow different, deeper. "He's with me now." But here's what Sarah couldn't understand. If this was the legendary Dogman of Blackwood Forest, why wasn't Kane dead? Sarah's radio crackled to life. Voices of her team scattered throughout the woods reporting negative sightings. She couldn't bring herself to respond. Her eyes remained fixed on the impossible scene before her, Marcus Kane standing calmly beside a creature that shouldn't exist, both watching the search team with those unnatural amber eyes. "Marcus," Sarah called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Where have you been? We've had 40 volunteers combing these woods since sunset." Kane tilted his head slightly, the gesture eerily mirrored by the creature beside him. "Time moves differently in there," he said, gesturing toward the dense forest behind him. "Deeper than you've ever gone, Sarah. Deeper than any of your maps show." Deputy Tom Rodriguez had his hand on his holstered weapon, but hadn't drawn it yet. Sarah could see the tremor in his fingers, the way his breathing had quickened. The other searchers, volunteers from town, a few off-duty firefighters, stood frozen in a semicircle, their flashlight beams wavering between Kane and the creature. "That thing killed the Brennan family," Rodriguez whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tore them apart last spring." The creature's ears pricked forward at the mention of the name, and a low rumble emanated from deep in its chest. Not quite a growl, but something that made every human present take an involuntary step backward. Everyone except Kane, who placed a steady hand on the creature's massive forearm. "That wasn't him," Kane said with unsettling certainty. "That was something else, something that's been using his territory, wearing his reputation like a mask." Sarah's mind raced through protocols, procedures, anything that might have prepared her for this moment. 30 years of search and rescue, from lost hikers to plane crashes, and nothing came close to standing in a forest clearing at dawn, talking to a man who'd emerged from the woods with a cryptid. "Marcus, you need medical attention," she said, falling back on practical concerns. "Hypothermia, dehydration, possible head trauma. You've been missing for 12 hours. "Have I?" Kane asked, and there was something in his tone that made Sarah's skin crawl. Felt longer, felt like days down in the deep places. The root chambers beneath the old growth, where the soil remembers everything that's ever died here. The creature shifted beside him, and Sarah caught a glimpse of something that made her stomach lurch. Around the beast's neck, barely visible beneath its thick fur, was what looked like a collar made of twisted metal and wood. Not manufactured, but crafted by hand from materials that seemed to pulse with their own dark energy. "What happened to you in there?" she asked. Kane smiled, and his canine teeth seemed sharper than she remembered. "I found what I was looking for, what I've been looking for, my whole life actually. The source of all those disappearances, all those stories, all those nights when people swear they hear howling that doesn't sound quite like any wolf they know." Rodriguez finally drew his weapon, the metallic click unnaturally loud in the pre-dawn stillness. "Sarah, we need to call this in. Federal Wildlife, State Police, somebody who deals with—" "With what, Tom?" Kane interrupted. "What exactly are you going to tell them? That you found a dogman in the Blackwood Forest? That it's been protecting these woods from something much worse? The creature's amber eyes fixed on Rodriguez, and the deputy's hand began to shake so violently he had to grip his weapon with both hands to keep it steady. "He won't hurt you," Kane said, though his smile suggested he couldn't make the same promise about himself. "Not unless you threaten what we're protecting." Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders like lead. Whatever had happened to Marcus Kane in those woods, whatever he'd become or encountered, her team was now standing at the center of something that would redefine everything they thought they knew about the Blackwood Forest. And deep in her gut, she knew this was only the beginning. The emergency beacon had gone silent at 3:47 a.m., according to the GPS tracker Sarah Chen clutched in her trembling hands. 12 hours. Marcus Kane had been missing for 12 goddamn hours in Blackwood Forest, and every minute that ticked by made the knot in her stomach tighten another degree. "Anything?" Jake Morrison called from across the makeshift command post they'd established at the forest's edge. His voice carried the forced calm of a man who'd seen too many searches end badly. Sarah shook her head, pushing a strand of black hair from her face. "Radio's still dead. GPS shows his last known position about 3 miles northeast, near the old logging road." She paused, studying the topographical map spread across the hood of their rescue vehicle. "That puts him right in the heart of the restricted zone." Jake's weathered face darkened. Everyone knew about the restricted zone, a section of Blackwood that had been off-limits to civilians for the past 18 months. Official reports cited unstable terrain and aggressive wildlife, but the locals whispered about other things, hikers who'd gone in and never come out, strange sounds echoing through the trees at night, animals found torn apart in ways that defied explanation. "Marcus knew better than to go in there alone," muttered Rodriguez, the newest member of their search and rescue team. His voice carried a nervous edge that made Sarah glance up from the map. "Marcus Kane doesn't make rookie mistakes," she snapped, though doubt gnawed at her certainty. Their team leader was methodical, careful, traits that had kept him alive through 15 years of mountain rescues and wilderness operations. But he'd been different lately. Distracted. Something had been eating at him ever since the Hendricks boy had vanished in these same woods 3 weeks ago. The radio crackled to life, making all 3 of them jump. Static filled the air, punctuated by what sounded almost like breathing. Sarah grabbed the handset. "Base to Kane, do you copy?" She waited, counting heartbeats. "Marcus, if you can hear this, we're coming for you." More static, then a sound that made her blood run cold. A low, rumbling growl that definitely hadn't come from any human throat. "What the hell was that?" Rodriguez whispered. Before anyone could answer, Jake's binoculars were pressed to his eyes, scanning the tree line. "Movement," he said sharply. 2 o'clock, about 100 yards out. Sarah followed his gaze and felt her breath catch. 2 figures emerged from the shadows between the towering pines, moving with an odd, synchronized gait. One was unmistakably human in build, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the familiar orange and black of search and rescue gear. The other... "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez breathed. The second figure stood nearly 8 feet tall, its form a grotesque fusion of man and wolf. Massive shoulders tapered to a powerful torso, covered in coarse, dark fur. Its legs bent at wrong angles, ending in claws that left deep gouges in the forest floor with each step. But it was the head that made Sarah's training abandon her, elongated and lupine with ears that twitched at every sound, and a muzzle filled with teeth designed for tearing flesh. Yet they walked together like old companions, neither showing any sign of distress or conflict. "That's Marcus," Jake said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "That's definitely Marcus." Sarah raised her own binoculars with hands that refused to stay steady. The human figure's face came into sharp focus, and her heart hammered against her ribs. It was Marcus, same angular jawline, same graying beard, same scar above his left eyebrow from a climbing accident years ago. But his eyes... Both figures stopped at the edge of the tree line, perhaps 50 yards away now. They turned in unison to face the rescue team, and Sarah nearly dropped her binoculars. Marcus's eyes glowed with an amber light that seemed to pulse with its own internal fire. When the creature beside him lifted its massive head, The same unnatural radiance burned in its gaze. "This isn't possible," Rodriguez stammered, backing toward their vehicle. "This isn't fucking possible." Marcus raised one hand in what might have been a greeting or a warning. His mouth moved, forming words that the distance swallowed before they could reach them. The creature's head cocked to one side, studying them with an intelligence that was far too human for comfort. Sarah forced herself to key the radio again. "Marcus, we're here to bring you home. Whatever happened out there, we can work through it." The figure that looked like their team leader shook his head slowly. Even from this distance, she could see something like sadness cross his features. He placed one hand on the creature's massive shoulder, and they began backing into the forest. "Wait!" Sarah shouted, abandoning the radio and starting forward. "Marcus, don't!" But the shadows swallowed them both, leaving only the whisper of wind through pine needles and the echo of her own voice calling into the darkness. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the radio, her training warring with the impossible sight before her. The creature, easily 8 feet tall at the shoulder, sat with an unnatural stillness beside Marcus, both sets of amber eyes tracking her movements with predatory focus. The morning mist swirled around them like smoke from a funeral pyre. "Marcus?" Her voice cracked despite her efforts to maintain composure. "Where have you been?" "We've been searching all night." Marcus tilted his head at an odd angle, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. When he spoke, his voice carried a strange resonance, like an echo bouncing off canyon walls. "Searching. Yes, I remember now." He blinked slowly, those awful golden eyes never leaving her face. "You were calling my name." The wolf thing beside him made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, deep in its chest. Sarah's skin crawled as she noticed how Marcus's breathing synchronized with the creature's, their chests rising and falling in perfect unison. "The team's been worried sick," she managed, forcing herself to take a step closer despite every instinct screaming at her to run. "You've been missing for 12 hours. What happened to your radio? Your GPS?" Marcus looked down at his equipment belt with apparent confusion, as if he'd forgotten such things existed. The radio hung there, crushed beyond recognition, its metal casing twisted into impossible spirals. His GPS unit was simply gone, leaving only frayed wires and empty clips. "I went deeper than planned," he said finally, his gaze drifting to the dark tree line behind him. "Found something, or perhaps it found me." The creature's ears pricked forward at his words, and Sarah could swear she saw intelligence flickering in those amber depths. Ancient, alien intelligence that had no business existing in the natural world. Its fur was the color of charcoal and shadow, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "What is that thing, Marcus?" Sarah's training kicked in, her hand moving instinctively toward the emergency flare on her belt. "And why isn't it attacking?" Marcus placed a hand on the creature's massive head, his fingers disappearing into the dark fur. The gesture looked disturbingly intimate, like a lover's caress. "She's not a thing. She has a name, though I don't think human tongues were meant to speak it." The wrongness of the situation hit Sarah like a physical blow. In 15 years of search and rescue, she'd seen people emerge from the wilderness changed, traumatized, hypothermic, delusional from exposure. But this was different. Marcus moved with fluid grace, showing no signs of fatigue or injury despite spending a night in terrain that had claimed dozens of lives over the decades. His clothes were unmarked, his skin unblemished. Even his hair looked perfectly groomed. "We need to get you to the medical station," she said, reaching slowly for her radio. "The whole team needs to know you're safe." "Safe?" Marcus repeated the word as if tasting something foreign and bitter. "Yes, I suppose I am that now." He stood with inhuman fluidity, and the creature rose beside him like a mountain of shadow and sinew. "But are you, Sarah?" The question sent ice through her veins. She'd known Marcus for 7 years, had trusted him with her life more times than she could count. The man before her wore Marcus's face, spoke with Marcus's voice, but something fundamental had changed. Something vital had been replaced. "The others will be looking for us," she said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Jake and Chen are working the eastern grid. They'll be here soon." Marcus nodded slowly, but his eyes, those terrible amber eyes, seemed to look through her rather than at her. Yes, the others. The creature beside him made that strange purring growl again, and Marcus's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "She's hungry, Sarah. It's been so long since she's tasted fear properly seasoned with understanding." Sarah's hand closed around the emergency flare, her thumb finding the ignition tab. Every horror story about Blackwood Forest came flooding back: the missing hikers, the search teams that vanished without trace, the strange lights witnessed by local rangers. Stories dismissed as folklore and superstition now seemed terrifyingly plausible. "Marcus, listen to me. Whatever happened to you out there, we can work through it. But I need you to come with me now. No questions, no arguments." The thing wearing her friend's face cocked its head again, and when it spoke, harmonized growls from the creature accompanied his words like a hellish choir. "Oh, Sarah. Sweet, practical Sarah, still thinking this is a rescue mission." He took a step forward, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "But you're the one who needs rescuing now. We all do." The creature's amber eyes began to glow brighter, and Sarah realized with growing horror that the golden light was starting to reflect in her own vision, seeping in at the edges like infection. The makeshift command post buzzed with nervous energy as dawn broke over Blackwood Forest. Sarah Chen hadn't slept, her eyes burning as she stared at the topographical maps spread across the folding table. Red X's marked every location where they'd found Marcus's trail the day before, each one leading deeper into the forest's heart before vanishing completely near Devil's Hollow. "Still nothing from the thermal drones," Rodriguez called out, lowering his radio. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually steady hands trembled slightly as he reached for his coffee. It's like the forest just swallowed him whole. Sarah's jaw tightened. In 15 years of search and rescue, she'd never lost a team member. Marcus Kane was more than that. He was her mentor, the man who'd taught her to read the forest's moods, to find hope in impossible situations. The irony wasn't lost on her that now she was hunting for the hunter himself. "Ma'am?" Officer Williams approached hesitantly, his young face pale in the morning light. "The dogs are acting strange again. They won't go past the tree line where we lost Kane's scent yesterday." Sarah looked toward the K9 unit. 3 German shepherds sat in a perfect line, their ears pinned back, whimpering softly as they stared into the dark spaces between the trees. These were seasoned search dogs, trained to track through the worst conditions, yet they trembled like puppies facing thunder. "Get me Lieutenant Hayes," she ordered, her instincts screaming that something was fundamentally wrong about this entire situation. 20 minutes later, Hayes arrived with 2 state police cruisers and a grim expression. Sarah had worked with him before. He was pragmatic, no nonsense, and didn't believe in things that couldn't be explained in a police report. "Chen," he nodded, approaching the command table. "Give me what you've got." Sarah traced Marcus's path on the map with her finger. He was tracking a missing hiker, Jenny Morrison, college student from Portland. Her car was found here at the south entrance 3 days ago. Marcus picked up her trail, but sometime around here, she tapped a spot marked with coordinates. Everything changes. The trail becomes erratic, like she was running. Then Marcus's own tracks start following the same pattern. Hayes frowned, studying the map. "Running from what?" "That's what we need to find out. But here's where it gets strange." Sarah pulled out a plastic evidence bag containing a plaster cast. "We found this print near where both trails disappear. It's not human, not quite wolf either. Too large, wrong shape entirely." The lieutenant examined the cast, his frown deepening. The print showed 5 distinct toe marks with deep claw impressions, but the heel and arch suggested something that walked upright. The entire thing was nearly 10 inches long. "Could be a hoax," Hayes said, but his voice lacked conviction. "College kids sometimes stage these things." "With what?" "Marcus Kane has been in these woods for 20 years. If someone was playing games, he'd spot it immediately. Sarah's voice cracked slightly, unless something happened to him first. A commotion near the tree line interrupted them. One of the search volunteers was backing away from the forest edge, pointing frantically at something in the shadows between the pines. "Movement," he called out. "Something big, maybe 50 yards in." Sarah grabbed her binoculars, scanning the indicated area. At first she saw nothing but the familiar pattern of trunk and shadow. Then a branch snapped audibly, and she caught a glimpse of something pale moving through the undergrowth. Human-sized, but moving wrong. Too fluid, too purposeful. "Marcus!" she called out, hope and dread warring in her chest. The movement stopped. Sarah held her breath, adjusting the focus on her binoculars. Through the maze of branches, she could make out a figure standing motionless in a small clearing. Human height and build, but something about the posture was off, predatory. "Kane! Marcus Kane!" Hayes shouted, his voice echoing off the trees. The figure's head turned toward them with an unnaturally smooth motion. Even at this distance, Sarah could see that the eyes caught the morning light strangely, reflecting it back like an animal's. But it was unmistakably Marcus. The familiar beard, the red flannel shirt he'd been wearing when he'd entered the forest. Then she saw what stood beside him. Sarah's hands shook as she adjusted the binoculars. A massive, wolf-like creature sat on its haunches next to Marcus, easily 4 feet tall even in that position. Its coat was midnight black except for silver markings along its muzzle and chest. But what made her blood freeze was the intelligence in its eyes, the same amber glow she'd seen reflected in Marcus's gaze. "Jesus Christ," Hayes breathed, having borrowed Rodriguez's binoculars. "What the hell is that thing?" As if responding to his words, both Marcus and the creature stepped forward in perfect synchronization, moving toward the tree line where the search team waited. Their movements were eerily coordinated, like two parts of the same predator. The dogs began howling. The medical bay at the ranger station hummed with tension as Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted the lamp over Marcus Kane's examination table. Through the window, she could see the creature pacing in the reinforced holding area they'd hastily constructed from chain-link panels and steel posts. Even in the harsh fluorescent light, its eyes burned like twin coals. "His vitals are completely normal," Sarah murmured, checking the readout for the 3rd time. "Temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, everything's textbook perfect. Too perfect, actually." Detective Ray Morrison leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What do you mean, too perfect?" "I mean his resting heart rate is exactly 60 beats per minute. Not 59, not 61. Exactly 60. His blood pressure is 120/80 on the dot. It's like his body has been calibrated." Marcus sat silently on the examination table, his amber eyes tracking their conversation. When Sarah had first shined a penlight into those eyes 20 minutes ago, she'd nearly dropped the instrument. The pupils didn't contract normally. They shifted like liquid mercury, maintaining that otherworldly glow. "The blood work will take a few hours," Sarah continued, "but I'm seeing some anomalies in the preliminary tests. His white cell count is elevated, but not in a way that suggests infection. It's more like his immune system is hyperactive, anticipating something." Outside, the creature released a low howl that made the windows vibrate. Marcus's head snapped toward the sound, and for a moment, his composed facade cracked. Sarah caught a glimpse of something wild behind his eyes, something hungry. "We need answers, Marcus," Morrison said, pushing off from the wall. "That thing out there killed Jim Patterson. I've got his blood under its claws, and you're sitting here acting like it's your pet dog." "It protected me," Marcus replied, his voice carrying an odd resonance. "The forest. It's not what we thought it was, Ray. There are things in those woods that have been sleeping for a long time. Old things. Hungry things." Sarah exchanged a glance with Morrison. "What kind of things?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Do you know why they call it Blackwood Forest? Not because of the trees. They're mostly pine and oak, nothing particularly dark about them. It got that name because of what lies beneath." The creature's howl came again, closer this time. Through the window, Sarah saw it pressed against the fence, Its massive head turned toward the medical bay. Toward Marcus. "There's a network down there," Marcus continued. "Roots, but not from any tree. They're old, older than the forest itself. They've been waiting, feeding on the lost hikers, the missing persons cases, feeding and growing stronger." Morrison stepped forward. "You're talking about plants?" "Not plants. Something else. Something that can think, plan, hunt." Marcus's eyes flared brighter. "It showed me things, Ray. Visions of what this place used to be, what it could become again. The creature, she's not the enemy. She's a guardian, the last of her kind. The roots killed the others, but they made a bargain with her." Sarah felt ice water in her veins. "What kind of bargain?" "Protection for servitude. She guards their feeding grounds, keeps potential threats away from the deep places. In return, they let her hunt the surface." "You're talking about Patterson," Morrison said grimly. Marcus nodded. "Jim was never supposed to go that deep. None of us were. But when I fell into that ravine, when the roots found me..." He touched his temple, and Sarah noticed thin, dark lines threading just beneath his skin like subcutaneous wiring. "They gave me a choice. Become part of their network, or feed it." The medical bay door burst open, and Ranger Williams stumbled in, his face pale. "We've got a problem. Those missing hikers from last month, the Hendersons. We just found their campsite. Or what's left of it." Morrison turned sharply. "Where?" "Half a mile from where we found Marcus. But here's the thing. The site's been stripped clean, not by animals. Everything's gone down through the ground like the earth just swallowed it whole. And there are holes, lots of them, perfect circles going straight down." Sarah looked at Marcus, whose expression had grown distant again. "The feeding cycle," he said softly. "It's accelerating. They've been dormant too long, and now they're waking up hungry." Outside, the creature began to pace more frantically, its massive form throwing shadows across the medical bay. As Sarah watched, she realized it wasn't pacing randomly. It was tracing a pattern, the same route, over and over, like a ritual. "Marcus," she said carefully, "what exactly did they do to you down there?" He looked at her with those burning amber eyes, and when he smiled, she saw that his teeth had grown sharper. "They made me a bridge," he said, "between their world and ours, and the crossing is about to begin." The creature's massive form filled the doorway of the ranger station, its amber eyes scanning the room with an intelligence that made Sarah's skin crawl. Behind it, Marcus stepped inside, moving with that same fluid grace she'd noticed at the hospital. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe across the walls. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice carrying an odd resonance that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Deputy Morrison's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon, but Sarah caught his wrist. Something told her that would be a very bad idea. The creature's nostrils flared slightly, and she could swear it was analyzing their scent, cataloging their fear. "Marcus," Sarah kept her voice steady, professional. "We've been trying to reach you. There are questions." "I know why you're here." He moved further into the room, and the wolf thing followed, its massive paws silent on the wooden floor. "You found the campsite." It wasn't a question. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. "How could you possibly?" "The same way I know you've been asking questions about other disappearances. The same way I know Deputy Morrison here has been having nightmares about amber eyes in the dark." Marcus tilted his head, studying Morrison with those unnatural glowing orbs. 3 nights running now, isn't it, Deputy?" Morrison went pale. Sarah hadn't known about any nightmares, but the way Morrison's jaw tightened told her Marcus was right. How could he know that? "What happened to those people, Marcus?" Sarah pressed. "The Hendricks family, the hikers from last month?" "They're safe." The words came from both Marcus and the creature simultaneously, a harmony of human speech and something deeper, more primal. The sound raised goosebumps along Sarah's arms. "Safe where?" Morrison found his voice, though it cracked slightly. "We found blood, Marcus. Lots of it." The creature moved closer, and Sarah caught its scent, pine and earth and something wild that made her hindbrain scream danger. But beneath that was something else, something almost familiar. "The forest is changing," Marcus said, his amber eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "It's been changing for decades. The old barriers are weakening, and things that should stay separate are bleeding through." "What are you talking about?" Sarah demanded. "Barriers to what?" "There are others out there," she whispered, understanding flooding through her with cold certainty. "The disappeared aren't gone," Marcus confirmed. "They're evolved, adapted. The forest, it calls to certain people. People with the right bloodline, the right genetic markers. It offers them a choice to become what?" Morrison's voice was barely above a whisper. The creature that had once been human stepped forward, and when it spoke, its voice held traces of a Midwestern accent Sarah recognized from missing person reports. "To become what we were always meant to be. To join the pack that guards the boundaries between worlds." Sarah's training kicked in, even as her worldview crumbled around her. The Hendricks family, all of them? Little Amy was too young, Marcus said, and for a moment his expression showed something almost human. Pain, maybe. Regret. The change. It doesn't always take in children. She's being cared for, loved. But she can never return to the outside world. She's seen too much. "You can't just take people," Morrison said, his hand moving toward his radio. "This is kidnapping. Murder." The creature's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth designed for tearing. "Murder implies death, Deputy. We're very much alive. More alive than we ever were in your concrete world." More footsteps outside, circling the building now. Sarah counted at least 6 distinct sets, maybe more. The fluorescent lights flickered again, and she noticed that each time they dimmed, the amber eyes in the room grew brighter. "What do you want from us?" she asked. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling he was seeing far more than just her surface thoughts. "You've been drawn here, Sarah. This isn't the first time you felt called to these woods, is it?" Her breath caught. Those childhood dreams, the pull she'd always felt toward Blackwood Forest, the reason she'd taken a job in this remote county despite better offers elsewhere. "It's in your blood," Marcus continued softly. "Ancient blood. The forest recognizes its own." "You're insane." But even as she said it, Sarah could feel something stirring inside her chest, a warmth that seemed to respond to the amber light in Marcus's eyes. "Am I?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his transformed irises. "Or am I the first person to finally tell you the truth about what you really are?" Outside, something howled in the distance, and deep in her bones, something howled back. The morning sun filtered through the medical facility's windows as Dr. Sarah Chen reviewed the blood work results for the 3rd time. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the printouts, the numbers and chemical compositions reading like some impossible riddle. Marcus Kane's blood contained compounds that shouldn't exist in nature, proteins with structures she'd never encountered, elevated levels of certain neurotransmitters, and something else entirely that the lab equipment couldn't even identify. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. 43 years of medical practice had taught her that impossible usually meant incomplete data, but every test confirmed the same inexplicable results. A soft knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Detective Riley Martinez entered, looking as exhausted as Sarah felt. "Any news on Kane's condition?" "That depends on how you define his condition," Sarah replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "His vital signs are perfect. Better than perfect, actually. His heart rate, blood pressure, reflexes, everything is operating at peak human efficiency. But these blood results..." Martinez leaned forward. "What about them?" "They suggest he's undergone some kind of fundamental biological change. The protein structures alone would take years of genetic therapy to achieve, assuming we even knew how to create them." Sarah handed over a simplified summary sheet. "And then there's his behavior. He's been asking about the creature constantly, almost obsessively. Claims it's waiting for him." Waiting where? He won't say. Every time we press him on details about what happened in those 12 hours, he becomes agitated. His pupils dilate, and Sarah hesitated, knowing how it would sound. His eyes take on that amber glow we witnessed yesterday. Martinez studied the medical report, though Sarah doubted the detective understood half the terminology. What about sedation? Can you keep him calm long enough for a proper interrogation? I've tried. Standard sedatives have no effect. I'd have to use doses that could be lethal to a normal person, and even then, I'm not sure they'd work. Sarah removed her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. Detective, in my professional opinion, Marcus Kane is no longer entirely human. The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Martinez set down the report and looked out the window toward the forest beyond the town's edge. The creature, we found tracks leading back into Blackwood. Sheriff Thompson has the area cordoned off, but the trail goes cold about 2 miles in. What kind of tracks? Large canine prints, but the spacing suggests something that walks upright at least part of the time. The stride length indicates a creature over 7 feet tall. Martinez turned back to Sarah. We also found something else. Torn pieces of fabric caught on branches along the trail. Fabric that matches the clothes Kane was wearing when he disappeared. Sarah's blood ran cold. Are you suggesting he followed it back into the forest? Or was dragged? But here's the thing. There's no blood, no signs of struggle. The fabric tears appear deliberate, almost like breadcrumbs leading deeper into Blackwood. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside her office. Raised voices, the sound of running feet, and then her nurse's voice over the intercom. Dr. Chen to room 12 immediately. Dr. Chen to room 12. Both women rushed from the office, following the sound of disturbance to Marcus Kane's room. They found 3 orderlies struggling to restrain him, though he didn't appear to be fighting them so much as trying to move past them. His eyes blazed with amber light, and when he spoke, his voice carried an odd resonance. "She's calling," he said, his gaze fixed on the window that faced Blackwood Forest. "She needs me. They're coming." "Who's coming, Marcus?" Martinez demanded, stepping into his line of sight. Kane's attention snapped to her with unnatural intensity. For a moment, his eyes flickered back to their normal brown, and something like recognition crossed his features. "The pack," he whispered. "They followed our scent. They know where she is now." "What pack?" "The wolves." Kane shook his head violently. "Not wolves. Never were wolves. They're like us now, but wrong, incomplete." His voice dropped to barely audible. "She tried to warn them away, but they won't listen. They want what she gave me." Sarah approached cautiously, her medical training warring with her instinct to flee. "Marcus, what did she give you?" Kane's amber eyes fixed on her, and for a terrifying moment, she saw something ancient and predatory looking back. "Purpose," he said simply. Then, with strength that shouldn't have been possible, he broke free from the orderly's grip and moved to the window. In the distance, barely visible among the trees, several large shapes moved through the forest toward town. Even from this distance, Sarah could see their eyes, multiple points of amber light growing steadily closer. Kane pressed his palm against the glass, leaving a handprint that seemed to shimmer with residual heat. "She's protecting you," he said, "but she can't hold them alone." The safe house felt smaller with each passing hour, walls seeming to press inward as tension thickened the air. Sarah had barely slept, her mind replaying the creature's metamorphosis over and over. Every creak of the old cabin made her fingers twitch toward her sidearm. Marcus sat motionless in the corner, back against the wall, amber eyes fixed on something none of them could see. The wolf thing lay beside him, its massive form rising and falling with each breath, ears occasionally swiveling toward sounds only it could detect. Neither had moved since dawn broke 3 hours ago. "We can't stay here," Rodriguez whispered, huddled near the window with Chen and Torres. "Whatever happened to Kane? It's spreading. Those amber eyes—" "Keep your voice down," Sarah hissed, though she wasn't sure why. Marcus showed no sign of hearing them anyway. lost in whatever trance had claimed him since sunrise. Chen pulled out his satellite phone for the dozenth time, checking for signal. Still nothing. The electromagnetic interference that plagued Blackwood had intensified overnight, creating a dead zone that stretched for miles. They were completely cut off. A low rumble emanated from the wolf's throat, not quite a growl, but something that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand on end. Marcus's head tilted slightly, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to focus. "Sarah." His voice carried an odd resonance, as if spoken from the bottom of a well. "You need to understand something." She approached slowly, hand resting on her weapon. "What is it, Marcus?" "The forest isn't just changing us. It's preparing for something that's been sleeping for a very long time." He blinked, and the amber glow intensified. "I can feel it stirring beneath the earth, in the deep places where roots drink from forgotten springs." "Marcus, you're not making sense," Sarah said, though ice formed in her stomach at his words. "We need to get you to a hospital, run some tests." A sharp crack outside silenced her. All heads turned toward the window as Torres peered through the blinds. "Movement," he breathed. "Multiple contacts, coming from the tree line." Sarah joined him, heart hammering as shapes emerged from the forest's edge. People, at least, they had been people once. Their movements were wrong, too fluid, too coordinated, and their eyes— "Amber," Chen whispered. "All of them." Sarah counted at least a dozen figures approaching the cabin, including what looked like park rangers and hikers. Some she recognized from missing person reports filed over the past months. They walked in perfect synchronization, bare feet silent on the forest floor. The wolf rose to its feet, hackles raised. But instead of aggression, its posture suggested anticipation. Marcus stood as well, moving with that same unnatural grace. "They're here for me," he said simply. "Like hell." Sarah drew her pistol, the others following suit. "Nobody's taking you anywhere." Marcus turned to face them, and Sarah's breath caught. His features were subtly different, sharper cheekbones, longer canines when he spoke. The transformation was accelerating. "You don't understand," he said with infinite sadness. "I'm not a prisoner anymore, Sarah. I'm a bridge, between what was and what's coming." The figures outside had formed a circle around the cabin, standing motionless as sentries. Waiting, Rodriguez backed toward the rear exit. "There's got to be another way out." The door exploded inward before he could reach it. More amber-eyed figures poured through, moving with inhuman speed. Sarah opened fire, her shots finding their marks but barely slowing the attackers. They absorbed bullets like they meant nothing. "The back window!" Chen shouted, smashing glass with his rifle butt. But as Torres dove through the opening, something massive erupted from the ground outside, roots and earth forming grasping tentacles that seized him mid-leap. His screams cut through the morning air as he was dragged into the soil, swallowed by the hungry earth. The wolf padded to Sarah's side, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its fur. To her shock, it positioned itself between her and the advancing figures. "Run," Marcus said quietly. "Take Chen and Rodriguez. Head for the old mining road. It's the only path the forest hasn't fully claimed yet." "I'm not leaving you behind," Sarah snarled, though even as she said it, she could see the futility. The amber-eyed figures filled the cabin now, surrounding Marcus like a protective detail. "You have to warn them," Marcus continued, his voice growing distant. "Tell them the sleeper is waking. Tell them Blackwood was never just a forest. It's a mouth, and it's getting hungry." The wolf nudged Sarah toward the broken window with surprising gentleness. In its ancient eyes, she saw something that might have been compassion. Behind her, Marcus was changing again, his form beginning to blur and shift. The amber light spread from his eyes across his skin like veins of molten gold. Sarah grabbed Chen and Rodriguez, and together they plunged through the window into the waiting embrace of a forest that was no longer entirely earthly. The laboratory's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted the microscope for the third time. her hands trembling slightly. The blood sample from Marcus Kane sat in a petri dish before her, but what she observed defied every principle of biology she'd studied for the past 15 years. The cells were moving. Not the normal drift of cellular material in solution, but deliberate, coordinated movement. They pulsed with the same amber luminescence she'd witnessed in Kane's eyes, and as she watched, they seemed to respond to her presence, clustering toward the edge of the dish, closest to where she sat. "This is impossible," she whispered, but the evidence stared back at her through the lens. She reached for her phone to document the phenomenon, but the moment the camera flash fired, the cells went dormant, returning to their normal appearance. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the lab. Sarah quickly sealed the samples and activated the containment protocols. The last thing Blackwater Station needed was contamination of unknown origin spreading through the facility. Sheriff Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his face grave. "Doc, we've got a problem. 3 more hikers went missing on the northern trail. Their campsite was disturbed. Disturbed how? Trees snapped at the base, claw marks on the rocks. But that's not the strangest part." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. There were human footprints leading away from the scene, barefoot, and they matched Kane's boot size. Sarah's blood ran cold. She glanced at the sealed samples, then back at Rodriguez. "How long ago?" "Park rangers found the site 2 hours ago. The trail's still fresh." Through the lab's small window, Sarah could see the edge of Blackwood Forest stretching into the distance. Somewhere in that maze of ancient trees, Marcus Kane was moving with purpose she couldn't begin to understand. The bloodwork suggested something had fundamentally changed his cellular structure, but without more time to analyze the samples, she was working blind. "Have you been able to reach the search team that went after him yesterday?" she asked. Rodriguez's expression darkened. "That's problem number 2. We lost radio contact with them around midnight. Their GPS beacons went dead shortly after." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If Kane was somehow connected to the disappearances, if whatever had happened to him in the forest was spreading, they were looking at a situation that could spiral far beyond their ability to contain. "I need to see the campsite," she said, already reaching for her field kit. "Doc, I don't think that's wise. If Kane is out there, then we need to understand what we're dealing with before more people disappear." She sealed the blood samples in a biohazard container. Whatever happened to him, it's not natural. His cellular structure has been altered at a molecular level. Rodriguez stared at her. "You're saying he's been infected with something?" "I'm saying he's been changed. Into what? I can't determine without more data." She paused at the lab door. "But I can tell you this. Those cells I extracted from his blood sample are still alive, and they're exhibiting behavior I've never seen before. They're almost intelligent." The drive to the campsite took them deep into the forest along narrow service roads that barely deserved the name. Ancient pines pressed close on both sides, their branches forming a canopy so thick that noon felt like twilight. Sarah found herself checking her phone repeatedly, but the signal had died miles back. There, Rodriguez pointed ahead to where yellow crime scene tape fluttered between the trees. The campsite was a scene of controlled chaos. 2 tents had been shredded, their contents scattered across the forest floor. Deep gouges scarred the bark of surrounding trees, too large and too precise to be from any known animal, but it was the ground that made Sarah's breath catch. Mixed among the obvious signs of violence were symbols carved into the earth, spiraling patterns that seemed to shift and flow when viewed peripherally. They reminded her uncomfortably of the cellular movement she'd observed under the microscope. "How many hikers were in the group?" she asked, kneeling beside one of the strange markings. 3. College kids from the university. Rodriguez consulted his notes. Emma Walsh, David Chen, no relation, and Michael Torres. All experienced hikers. Sarah ran her fingers along the carved lines in the dirt. The soil felt warm, almost feverish, and for just a moment, she could have sworn she felt a pulse beneath the earth. She jerked her hand back. "Sheriff, we need to evacuate the area." Set up a perimeter at least 5 miles out. What are you not telling me, Doc? Before Sarah could answer, a sound echoed through the forest. A howl that was neither fully human nor fully animal. It was answered by another, then another, until the trees themselves seemed to vibrate with the chorus. Rodriguez's hand went to his service weapon. That's coming from multiple directions. Sarah's eyes found the tree line, searching for movement. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, amber eyes were watching them. The creature's howl shattered the night like glass, reverberating through the trees with such primal fury that Sarah felt her bones vibrate. She pressed herself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, her breath coming in sharp puffs of vapor that betrayed her location in the freezing air. Behind her, Tom's ragged breathing seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence that followed. Marcus stepped into the clearing where they'd made their temporary camp, his amber eyes scanning the darkness with predatory precision. The transformation was complete now. Whatever humanity had remained in him during their earlier encounters had been stripped away, leaving something that wore his face like a mask. His movements were fluid, wrong, each step synchronized perfectly with the massive wolf creature that stalked beside him. "I can smell your fear," Marcus called out, his voice carrying an unnatural resonance that seemed to come from multiple throats. "It's intoxicating, like copper pennies and desperation." Sarah's radio crackled softly against her belt, and she quickly reached down to silence it before the static could give them away. Through the brief burst of noise, she caught fragments of communication from the outside world, rescue teams being recalled, perimeters being established. The authorities were pulling back, containing the situation rather than confronting it. Tom's hand found her shoulder, his grip trembling. She could feel the fever radiating from his body, the infection from his earlier wound spreading despite their makeshift bandaging. Dark veins were already visible creeping up his neck, and his left eye had begun to show flecks of that terrible amber light. The wolf creature lifted its massive head, nostrils flaring as it tasted the air. Its eyes locked onto their hiding spot with disturbing intelligence, and Sarah felt her heart drop into her stomach. There was no more time for stealth. "Run," she whispered. But Tom was already moving. They burst from cover together, crashing through the underbrush as the night exploded into chaos behind them. Marcus's laughter followed them, rich and terrible, while the creature's pursuit was marked by the splintering of trees and the wet sound of massive paws hitting the forest floor. Sarah's headlamp beam danced wildly as she ran, illuminating snapshots of nightmare, gnarled branches that reached like fingers, shadows that moved independently of their sources, and the growing certainty that the forest itself had become complicit in their hunt. The trees seemed to shift and close ranks behind them, blocking potential escape routes while channeling them deeper into the woods. Tom stumbled, crying out as he crashed into a fallen log. When Sarah turned back to help him, she saw that the amber light in his eye had spread, creating geometric patterns that pulsed with his heartbeat. His fingernails had grown longer, sharper, and when he looked at her, she saw a flicker of something inhuman behind his gaze. "Sarah," he gasped, his voice strained. "I can hear it calling to me. The voice in the trees. It's beautiful." She hauled him to his feet, ignoring the way his skin felt too warm, too alive beneath her touch. "Fight it, Tom. Whatever's happening to you, fight it." But even as she spoke, she could see the battle was already being lost. The infection wasn't just physical, it was rewriting something fundamental in his neural pathways, creating new connections that shouldn't exist. She thought of Dr. Chen's notes, the references to symbiotic relationships and evolutionary leaps. This wasn't a disease in any traditional sense. It was an upgrade. The pursuit sounds had stopped, which somehow felt worse than being chased. In the oppressive silence, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears and the subtle creaking of the forest around them. Somewhere in the distance, she caught the faint sound of running water. "The stream," she whispered. "If we can reach the stream." Tom's hand clamped down on her wrist with inhuman strength. When she looked at his face, both eyes were now burning with amber light, and his smile revealed teeth that had grown too sharp for his mouth. "Why would we want to leave?" he asked, his voice harmonizing with itself in impossible ways. "Don't you understand, Sarah? We're becoming something better. Something perfect." Sarah yanked her arm free, stumbling backward as Tom's form began to shift and elongate. His spine curved with wet, crackling sounds, and dark fur sprouted along his arms. The transformation was faster than what they'd witnessed with Marcus, as if the process was becoming more efficient with each iteration. She turned and ran alone through the darkness, Tom's howl joining the creature's song somewhere behind her. The sound was heartbreaking and terrifying in equal measure, the death cry of her friend and the birth announcement of something else entirely. The amber light was spreading through the forest now, visible in the eyes of watching animals and pulsing beneath the bark of ancient trees. Blackwood Forest was awakening, and Sarah was beginning to understand that Marcus's disappearance hadn't been the beginning of this nightmare. It had been the catalyst for something that had been waiting here for centuries. The forest floor beneath Sarah's feet felt different now, as if it were breathing. Each step sent subtle vibrations through the earth, like a massive heartbeat pulsing just beneath the surface. She pressed her back against the rough bark of an ancient oak, trying to steady her racing pulse while Marcus and the creature moved through the underbrush ahead. 20 yards away, Marcus knelt beside a cluster of twisted saplings, his amber eyes scanning the ground with predatory focus. The wolf thing circled him slowly, its massive head swiveling toward sounds Sarah couldn't hear. When Marcus placed his palm flat against the earth, the creature froze, ears pricked forward. "They're close," Marcus said without looking up, his voice carrying that new harmonic quality that made Sarah's skin crawl. "3 of them, maybe 4. Sarah's radio crackled softly against her hip. Chen's voice came through in a harsh whisper. "Alpha Team to Bravo. We've got eyes on your position. Something's wrong with the trees here. They're moving without wind." She fumbled for the radio, keeping her movements minimal. "Copy that. Maintain distance. Do not engage." Through her earpiece, she heard Rivera's sharp intake of breath. "Sarah!" The temperature just dropped 15 degrees in the span of 30 seconds. "My gear's going haywire." Marcus stood abruptly, his head tilting at an unnatural angle. The creature beside him mirrored the motion, and Sarah felt ice form in her veins. They looked like synchronized predators responding to the same invisible signal. "They know we're here," Marcus said. But he wasn't speaking to Sarah. He was addressing the forest itself, his voice pitched low and resonant. "They've been waiting." The wolf creature let out a sound that wasn't quite a howl, something between a growl and a song that seemed to come from deep within the earth. The sound reverberated through the trees, and Sarah felt it in her chest, in her bones. Other sounds answered from the darkness beyond, creating a chorus that made her teeth ache. Marcus began walking deeper into the forest, following a path Sarah couldn't see. The creature flanked him, moving with fluid grace despite its enormous size. Sarah had no choice but to follow, her boots crunching on fallen leaves that seemed to glow faintly in the amber light emanating from Marcus's eyes. Her radio sparked again. "Sarah, we're reading multiple heat signatures converging on your location." Peterson's voice was tight with fear. "Large ones. You need to get out of there now." She wanted to respond, wanted to coordinate an extraction. But something told her that breaking the eerie silence would be catastrophic. Marcus had stopped again, this time at the edge of a clearing she didn't remember from any topographical map. The space was perfectly circular, surrounded by trees that grew in unnaturally straight lines. In the center of the clearing stood a structure that shouldn't exist, a ring of standing stones covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The stones were ancient, older than anything that should be in these woods, and they pulsed with the same amber light that filled Marcus's eyes. "This is where it started," Marcus said, his voice echoing strangely in the open space. "Before the town, before the people. This is what drew everything here." The wolf creature approached the stones, sniffing at the base of each one. Where its breath touched the ancient rock, the symbols flared brighter, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. Sarah's radio exploded with static, then cleared to reveal Chen's panicked voice. "They're everywhere. Sarah, get out." "They're coming from all directions." The sound of gunfire erupted from her earpiece, followed by screams that cut off abruptly. Sarah pressed the transmit button with shaking fingers. "Alpha Team, respond." "Chen, do you copy?" Nothing but static answered her. Marcus turned to face her, and in the amber glow of his eyes, Sarah saw something that chilled her more than the gunfire or the screams. She saw pity. "They can't help us now," he said gently. "They don't understand what they're fighting." From the tree line surrounding the clearing, shapes began to emerge. At first, Sarah thought they were more wolf creatures, but as they moved into the amber light, she realized they were something else entirely. They walked upright, but wrong, their limbs too long and joints bending in impossible directions. Their eyes glowed with the same unnatural light, but their faces were almost human. Almost, but not quite. "The first ones," Marcus explained, as if reading her horrified expression. "The ones who came before me, before us." One of the figures stepped forward, and Sarah recognized the ranger's uniform it wore, though the fabric was torn and stained with something dark. The face beneath the ranger's hat had once belonged to a human being, but whatever looked out through those amber eyes was something else entirely. "Welcome, sister," it said in a voice like wind through dead leaves. "We've been waiting so very long for you to come home." The emergency broadcasts crackled through the static-filled air as Dr. Sarah Chen watched the evacuation vehicles streaming down the mountain road from her monitoring station. The CDC had worked fast, too fast, Marcus thought as he observed from the tree line with Fenris at his side. Government efficiency like this only happened when they already knew what they were dealing with. "They're herding them like sheep," Fenris growled, his massive form tensing as another convoy of black SUVs wound through the valley below. "Your kind submits so easily to authority." Marcus felt the familiar burn of amber light behind his eyes. The bond between them had grown stronger over the past day, and with it came an increasing sense of wrongness about the official response. This isn't standard protocol, even for potential biological hazards. Through the enhanced connection, he could sense other presences moving through the forest, more of Fenris's kind, awakening after decades of slumber. The government knew about them, had always known. Sarah's voice carried across the valley through her megaphone as she supervised the loading of a transport truck. Even from this distance, Marcus could smell her fear, could hear the elevated rhythm of her heartbeat. She kept glancing toward the forest, toward him, though he knew she couldn't see them from her position. "The pack grows restless," Fenris said, his ears swiveling toward sounds Marcus couldn't yet perceive. "They hunger for the hunt, but the humans flee before we can choose those worthy of joining us." Marcus gripped the ancient wolf's thick fur, trying to maintain some semblance of his human reasoning even as predatory instincts flooded his nervous system. "There has to be another way. Not everyone needs to become like us. You still cling to weakness." Fenris turned his amber eyes on Marcus, and for a moment the search and rescue veteran saw not his companion but something far older and more alien than he'd imagined. "The transformation chose you because you were already between worlds, between civilization and wilderness, between savior and predator. But you cannot serve both natures forever." A new sound cut through the evening air. Helicopters approaching from the east. Not evacuation birds, but something heavier, more military in its rhythm. Marcus's enhanced hearing picked up radio chatter about containment protocols and authorized lethal force. His stomach dropped as the implications crystallized. "They're not evacuating the civilians to protect them from us," he whispered. "They're evacuating them to clear the field." Fenris's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile if displayed on a human face. "Now you begin to understand. Your government has dealt with our kind before. They know we cannot be negotiated with, cannot be captured, cannot be studied, only destroyed or contained." The helicopters swept overhead in formation, their searchlights cutting through the growing darkness. Marcus pressed himself and Fenris deeper into the shadows of an ancient pine grove, its thick canopy providing cover from aerial surveillance. But even as they hid, he could feel other members of the pack moving through the forest, converging on their position. One by one, they emerged from the darkness, wolves the size of bears, their eyes burning with the same amber fire that had claimed Marcus. But these weren't like Fenris, ancient and cunning. These were recent converts, still wild with the hunger of transformation. Marcus could smell fresh blood on their muzzles, could see scraps of fabric and leather caught in their claws. "You've been busy," Marcus said, though his voice carried less condemnation than he'd expected. The pack bond made their actions feel almost justified, necessary even. "The change spreads most easily during times of fear," Fenris explained as his offspring circled them. "Your rescue team, the researchers who came looking for evidence, the security personnel sent to establish a perimeter, all of them were already isolated, already touched by the forest's influence. We simply accelerated their evolution." Through the pack's shared consciousness, Marcus suddenly understood the scope of what was happening. Sarah's missing team members hadn't died or fled. They were here, transformed, their human memories overlaid with something far more primal. He could sense them now, feel their individual presences like stars in a constellation of predatory awareness. The helicopter searchlights swept closer, and Marcus heard the distinctive whine of military vehicles grinding up the access road. Time was running out for whatever choice he was supposed to make. "The humans will come with fire and steel," Fenris said, reading his thoughts through their bond. "They will burn the forest to ash rather than let us spread beyond these boundaries, unless we give them something else to fear." Marcus felt the pack's hunger pressing against his consciousness, like a tide of amber light. 23 transformed souls, each one a bridge between human intelligence and predatory perfection. They could scatter through the evacuation zones, disappear into the civilian population, spread the change far beyond what any containment protocol could manage. All it would take was one word from him, one choice between his old life and his new nature. The helicopters circled closer, and Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of both worlds pressing down on his shoulders. The command center had become a tomb of flickering monitors and abandoned coffee cups. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the reinforced glass, watching the amber glow pulse through the forest canopy like a diseased heartbeat. 3 hours had passed since Marcus and the creature vanished into Blackwood's depths, and the silence felt heavier than lead. "Seismic activities increasing," Rodriguez called out, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "Whatever's happening down there, it's big." Sarah turned from the window, studying the readouts cascading across multiple screens. The patterns were unlike anything in their geological databases, rhythmic, almost breathing, as if the Earth itself had developed a pulse. Temperature readings showed pockets of impossible heat scattered throughout the forest floor, each one corresponding to those damned amber lights. "Ma'am." Jenkins approached hesitantly, clutching a tablet. "The satellite feeds are showing something you need to see." The thermal imaging made Sarah's blood freeze. Dozens of heat signatures moved through the forest in perfect synchronization, their forms too large and angular to be human. They converged toward the center of Blackwood like spokes on a wheel, all following the same unwavering path Marcus had taken. "How many?" Sarah whispered. 43 confirmed, Jenkins replied. "And that's just what we can track through the canopy." A new voice cut through the tension. Dr. Elizabeth Kane, the CDC consultant who'd arrived that morning with a team of hazmat specialists. "This isn't a rescue operation anymore. It's a containment protocol." Sarah spun around. "Containment of what?" Dr. Kane's weathered face remained impassive as she adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses. 3 months ago, a geological survey team reported unusual spore concentrations in this region. Fungal specimens unlike anything in recorded taxonomy. The samples we recovered showed remarkable adaptive properties. "You knew about this?" Sarah's voice rose dangerously. "Before Marcus went missing?" "We suspected biological contamination, yes. But the scale of infection," Dr. Kane gestured toward the monitors. "This exceeds our worst projections." Rodriguez slammed his fist on the console. "Infection. Marcus isn't infected. He's in control. He chose to go back." "Did he?" Dr. Kane pulled up a microscopic image on her tablet, twisted, root-like structures that seemed to pulse with their own malevolent life. These organisms don't just parasitize their hosts, they integrate with neural tissue, rewriting cognitive patterns while maintaining the illusion of free will. Your friend Marcus believes he's making choices, but he's operating under biological imperatives that aren't his own. The room fell silent except for the electronic hum of equipment and the distant rumble of helicopters maintaining their perimeter. Sarah felt something cold and sharp twist in her stomach as pieces began falling into place. "The creature," she said slowly. "It was the first host." Dr. Kane nodded grimly. "Patient zero, if you will. A wolf that wandered into a contaminated zone and underwent rapid physiological transformation. The organism learned from that initial bonding how to modify bone density, muscle mass, sensory capabilities. By the time it encountered Marcus, it had perfected the process. But why? What does it want?" Before Dr. Kane could answer, every screen in the command center flickered and went black. Emergency lighting bathed the room in hellish red as backup systems engaged. Through the observation window, the forest had gone completely dark. No amber glow, no movement, just absolute midnight silence. Then the ground began to shake. Books toppled from shelves. Coffee mugs crashed to the floor. The reinforced walls of the command center groaned under stress they weren't designed to handle. Sarah gripped the nearest console as a sound rose from the depths of Blackwood, a harmony of voices that might once have been human, joined by something far older and infinitely hungry. "It's the emergency event," Dr. Kane shouted over the noise. "The organism has reached critical mass. It's ready to expand beyond the forest." The singing stopped abruptly, leaving in silence more terrifying than the chaos. In that stillness, Sarah heard something that made her heart skip. Footsteps on the metal stairs leading to the command center. Slow, deliberate, accompanied by the soft pad of enormous paws. "He's coming back," Jenkins whispered. Sarah drew her sidearm, though she knew bullets would be useless. The footsteps paused just outside the door, and she could smell something wrong. The scent of rich earth and decay, of things that grew in darkness and fed on what others left behind. When Marcus spoke through the reinforced door, his voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. "Sarah, I need you to see what I've seen. What we've found down there. It's beautiful. It's the answer to everything we never knew to ask." The door handle turned slowly, metal groaning under a grip far stronger than any human hand. Sarah raised her weapon, finger on the trigger, as amber light began seeping through the gap between door and frame. "It doesn't hurt," Marcus continued, his voice now joined by others. A chorus of search and rescue personnel who'd vanished over the years. "It just changes everything." The abandoned mining camp emerged from the forest like a wound in the earth, its skeletal structures reaching toward the darkening sky. Sarah's flashlight beam swept across rusted equipment and collapsed buildings, revealing decades of decay. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with something that made her skin crawl. "This is it," Marcus said, his amber eyes reflecting her light like mirrors. The massive wolf creature padded silently beside him, its presence both comforting and terrifying. "The source," Chen's radio crackled to life. "Base camp to field team. We've lost contact with the evacuation units. Please respond." Sarah grabbed the radio. "Field team here. What do you mean lost contact?" Static filled the air for several seconds before Rodriguez's voice came through, strained and urgent. "The transformations, they're accelerating. We have at least 15 people showing symptoms now. And Sarah," his voice dropped to a whisper, "some of them aren't human anymore." The blood drained from Sarah's face. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less. The town's in chaos. Whatever you're doing out there, do it fast." Marcus was already moving toward the center of the camp, where a large shaft descended into the earth. The wolf creature's hackles rose as they approached, a low growl rumbling from its throat. Sarah followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The mine," Marcus said, stopping at the edge of the pit. "It goes down 3 levels. The deepest chamber is where they found it first." "Found what?" Chen demanded, training his own flashlight on the wooden framework surrounding the shaft. "The meteor fragment." 40 years ago, a team of miners broke through into a natural cavern. Inside was a piece of something that fell from the sky centuries earlier. They thought it was valuable, rare earth metals, maybe radioactive materials they could sell. Marcus's voice took on a hollow quality. They brought it up, studied it, and then the first changes began. Sarah peered into the darkness below. The shaft seemed to swallow her light completely. The cover-up. The mining company shut down operations. Not before it was too late. The fragment had already been exposed to air, to human contact. It began to leak, influence, change. Marcus turned to face them, and for a moment his features seemed to shift in the shadows. The company buried everything, literally. They collapsed the upper levels, sealed the mine, evacuated the camp, but the fragment is still down there. A howl echoed from the direction they'd come, long, mournful, and definitely not human. Chen spun around, his rifle ready. "We're not alone out here. The others are coming," the wolf creature spoke, its voice like gravel over steel. "The changed ones. They can sense the proximity to the source." More howls answered the first, creating a chorus that seemed to surround them. Sarah's mind raced. If we destroy the fragment, will it stop the transformations? Marcus exchanged a look with the wolf creature. Some silent communication passed between them. Not destroy, contain. The energy can't be destroyed, but it can be redirected, channeled away from the population center. How? Chen asked, his eyes scanning the tree line for movement. Someone has to go down there. Someone who's already been changed but can still think, still choose. Marcus's amber eyes met Sarah's. The fragment responds to conscious will. A transformed person could theoretically redirect its influence back underground, seal it away. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You're talking about a suicide mission. I'm talking about choice," Marcus replied quietly. "For the first time since this began, I can choose what happens next." The sounds of movement through the underbrush grew closer. Branches snapped. Something large crashed through the forest toward them. Chen's radio squawked with panicked voices from town. More transformations, more chaos, the situation deteriorating by the minute. "There has to be another way," Sarah said desperately. "Some other solution that doesn't require—" "There isn't." The wolf creature's voice cut through her protests. "I've seen the memories Marcus carries now. The mining company tried everything else. Chemical suppressants, electromagnetic barriers, even bombing the site. Nothing worked. The fragment's influence only grew stronger." A figure stumbled into their circle of light, Deputy Walsh, but changed. His face was elongated, covered in patches of coarse fur. His hands had become claws, but his eyes still held human intelligence, human terror. "Help me!" he gasped, his voice distorted but recognizable. I can feel it pulling at my mind, making me want to hunt, to kill. Behind him, more shapes moved through the darkness. Some still vaguely human, others fully transformed into something between man and beast, all of them converging on the mine shaft, drawn by the same inexorable force. Marcus stepped toward the wooden framework surrounding the shaft. "It's time." "Wait!" Sarah called out. But he was already lowering himself into the darkness, the wolf creature following without hesitation. The radio crackled one final time. "Field team, the town is lost. Repeat, the town is lost." The safe house trembled as something massive struck the reinforced walls. Dust rained from the ceiling beams while Sarah pressed herself against the barricaded window, watching amber eyes materialize from the forest darkness like hellish stars. "How many?" Detective Morrison whispered, checking his weapon for the third time in as many minutes. Sarah counted the glowing pairs surrounding their position. At least 15, maybe more. Her voice cracked. "They're everywhere." The pack had found them despite their careful retreat through the underground tunnels. Now, the creatures circled the abandoned ranger station like predators who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. The building groaned under another impact, this one from the eastern wall. Dr. Chen frantically typed on her laptop, the screen's blue glow harsh against her pale face. The transformation accelerant is almost ready, but I need more time to synthesize the reversal compound. Time we don't have, Morrison said, as claws scraped against the metal shutters. The sound sent ice through Sarah's veins. Outside, a howl split the night. Not quite wolf, not quite human. It was answered by a chorus of others, their voices weaving together in a harmony that spoke of intelligence, coordination, purpose. Sarah recognized the lead voice immediately. "Marcus," she breathed. The howling stopped. In the sudden silence, she could hear her own heartbeat, the whisper of wind through broken trees, the soft padding of enormous feet circling their shelter. Sarah Marcus's voice drifted through the walls, distorted but unmistakably his. "Come out. You don't understand what you're fighting." She closed her eyes, remembering the man she'd known, the fearless leader who pulled her team through countless rescues, who'd never left anyone behind. That man was gone, replaced by something that wore his voice like a mask. "We're not the monsters here," Marcus continued, his words echoing strangely. "The forest showed me the truth. Humanity is the infection. We're the cure." Morrison moved to the radio, speaking in urgent whispers to the military units, converging on their position. But Sarah knew reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. The creatures could tear through the barricades whenever they chose. They were playing with their prey, savoring the fear. Dr. Chen looked up from her laptop. "I think I know why they haven't attacked yet. The transformation isn't complete. They need living subjects to spread the contagion. Dead hosts are useless." "Comforting," Morrison muttered. Another impact shook the building, followed by the screech of tearing metal. Through a gap in the shutters, Sarah glimpsed a massive clawed hand. Marcus's hand, but wrong, elongated, ending in talons that could shred steel. "The reversal compound," Sarah said. "How do we deliver it?" "Direct injection into the bloodstream. But the window for effectiveness shrinks with each passing hour. Some of these creatures—" Chen shook her head. "They may be too far gone." The eastern wall buckled inward with a thunderous crack. Moonlight streamed through the breach, and with it came the reek of wet earth and predator musk. A shadow filled the gap, too large to be human, too intelligent to be animal. Marcus squeezed through the opening, his transformed body moving with fluid grace despite its impossible size. His amber eyes fixed on Sarah, and for a moment she saw something familiar flicker in their depths. Pain, regret, the ghost of the man he'd been. "I tried to resist," he said, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. "But the forest, it showed me what we could become, what we need to become." Two more creatures flanked him, members of their old search and rescue team, their faces stretched into lupine masks but still recognizable. Sarah's stomach lurched as she recognized Jenkins, who'd taught her to read forest signs, and Rodriguez, who'd saved her life during a blizzard 3 years ago. "The old world is dying," Marcus continued, stepping closer. "We can be part of something greater, something pure." Morrison raised his weapon, but Marcus moved faster than thought. The gun flew from the detective's hands, and Morrison slammed into the far wall with bone-crushing force. He slumped to the floor, unconscious or worse. Dr. Chen fumbled for the syringe containing the reversal compound, but Rodriguez was on her in an instant. The laptop crashed to the floor, its screen shattering, taking with it their hopes for a cure. That left Sarah alone with the thing that had been Marcus Kane. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, reaching out with one massive, clawed hand. "The change is beautiful, liberating. You'll understand once you feel the forest's song in your blood." Sarah backed against the wall, her mind racing. The broken laptop sparked at her feet, its hard drive potentially containing Chen's research. If she could somehow get it to the military units, maybe they could still synthesize the cure. Marcus's hand touched her cheek with surprising gentleness. His claws, she noticed, were retracted. He was still fighting the transformation, somewhere deep inside. "Remember who you are," she whispered. The amber glow pulsed through Marcus's veins like liquid fire, as he stood at the edge of the Blackwood Forest, watching the military vehicles retreat into the distance. Their headlights flickered between the trees before disappearing entirely, leaving only the sound of engines fading into the night. Beside him, the massive wolf creature's breathing created small clouds in the cold air, its own amber eyes tracking the departure with predatory focus. Sarah's voice crackled through the radio clipped to Marcus's vest. All units have pulled back to the checkpoint. They're setting up a perimeter 2 miles out. Her transmission was strained, barely controlled. Marcus, what you did back there, that wasn't human strength. He lifted the radio slowly, feeling the weight of her words. The memory of tearing through the armored vehicle's hull with his bare hands was vivid, terrifying in its clarity. I know. The wolf creature turned its massive head toward him, and for a moment, their consciousness touched. Images flashed between them. The forest's ancient network spreading beneath the earth like a vast nervous system, roots and fungal networks carrying messages across impossible distances. The entity that had chosen them both was older than human civilization, patient beyond measure, and utterly alien in its logic. The others will come back, Marcus said aloud, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to Sarah or the creature. They'll bring more weapons, more men. Through their shared connection, he felt the wolf creature's response, not words, but concepts. The forest was growing stronger. Each hour that passed saw its influence spreading beyond the tree line, seeping into the soil, the water table, the very air. Soon, the distinction between the forest and the world beyond would become meaningless. Sarah's radio crackled again. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Before you disappeared, before all of this started, there were reports, missing hikers, strange animal attacks, but they go back months. This didn't begin when you entered the forest. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. How long? At least 6 months. Maybe longer. The Park Service has been covering it up, attributing disappearances to bear attacks or exposure. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I think whatever's in there has been waiting for you specifically. The wolf creature's ears twitched, and Marcus felt its attention shift. Through their bond, he sensed movement in the deeper forest, not the chaotic scrambling of fleeing animals, but purposeful, coordinated motion. Other changed ones were emerging from the darkness, drawn by the confrontation with the military unit. They came slowly at first, a woman in torn hiking gear, whose limbs had elongated unnaturally, her fingers ending in bark-like claws. A park ranger whose uniform hung in tatters around a frame that had grown too large for human proportions. Behind them, shapes that had once been animals but now defied classification moved between the trees with fluid, unnatural grace. My God, Marcus breathed, watching the gathering. Through the amber glow in his eyes, he could see the threads of connection linking each transformed being to the vast network beneath the forest floor. They were all nodes in something vast and growing, their individual consciousness still present but subsumed into a larger purpose. The woman who had once been a hiker stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies almost below hearing. The catalyst approaches completion. The boundary weakens. Marcus felt Sarah's presence through the radio, her breathing sharp with fear. He realized she could probably hear everything. Sarah, you need to get everyone as far from the forest as possible. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a choice anymore. He looked at his hands, watching amber light pulse beneath his skin like a second circulatory system. I can feel it changing me more each minute. Whatever I was before, that person is disappearing. The wolf creature pressed against his side, and through their connection he experienced a flash of its memories, not from after its transformation but from before. A glimpse of what it had been, a conservation biologist named Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had entered the forest 3 months ago to investigate reports of ecological anomalies. She had fought the change longer than most, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend what was happening to her. In the end, her knowledge had made her transformation more complete, more purposeful. Marcus. Sarah's voice was desperate now. Fight it. You're stronger than whatever's in there. He wanted to laugh at the irony. Strength had nothing to do with it. The entity in the forest didn't force change. It offered evolution, a chance to become part of something larger than individual existence. The horror wasn't in the transformation itself, but in how seductive it felt, how right it seemed as the amber light spread through his nervous system. The gathered changed ones began to move deeper into the forest, and Marcus felt the pull to follow them. Something was happening at the forest's heart, a convergence that had been building for months. His disappearance, his transformation, it had all been preparation for what came next. The emergency broadcast crackled through every device in the county. Mayor Hendricks' voice barely containing his panic as he declared a state of emergency. Sarah listened from the medical tent they'd hastily erected at the forest's edge, watching Marcus pace like a caged animal, while the wolf creature, Fenris he called it, lay motionless nearby. The town's in chaos, Dr. Chen reported, returning from a supply run with haunted eyes. 3 more people found dead, torn apart, and there are reports of other things emerging from the deeper parts of the forest. Marcus stopped pacing, his amber eyes flashing. It's starting. The barriers between worlds are breaking down completely. Sarah studied the readings on her tablet, the electromagnetic signatures she'd been tracking for days now spiking off the charts. These energy levels, they're astronomical. Whatever's happening in there, it's accelerating. Because the ritual was interrupted, Marcus said grimly. The ancient pact that kept them contained. When I bonded with Fenris, we became part of it, but we also destabilized it. The old magic is unraveling. Through the tent opening, Sarah could see the forest writhing in the distance, trees swaying without wind, shadows moving independently of their sources. The very air seemed to shimmer with malevolent energy. There has to be a way to stop this, she insisted, though her scientific mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Everything she'd believed about the nature of reality had crumbled over the past few days. Marcus knelt beside Fenris, placing a hand on the creature's massive flank. The wolf's breathing was labored, each exhale a visible cloud in the suddenly frigid air. There is, but you won't like it. Before Sarah could respond, screams echoed from the direction of town. Through the trees they could see an orange glow, fires burning in the distance. The emergency broadcast cut to static, then silence. Tell me, Sarah demanded, grabbing Marcus by the shoulders. His skin was fever-hot to the touch, and she could feel an electric current running beneath the surface. The pact requires a guardian, Marcus explained, his voice hollow. Someone to stand watch at the threshold between worlds. For centuries it was the original inhabitants of this land, then it fell to others who understood the old ways. But the line was broken. That's why everything started going wrong. So become the guardian, Sarah said desperately. You and Fenris. You're already connected to whatever's in there. Marcus smiled sadly, and for a moment she saw the man she'd known before this nightmare began. That's just it, Sarah. To become the guardian means crossing over completely, becoming part of the forest itself. There's no coming back from that. Another chorus of screams pierced the night, closer this time. Through the forest canopy, Sarah could see shapes moving, twisted forms that defied description, refugees from humanity's darkest nightmares made manifest. How long do we have? She asked quietly. Hours, maybe less. Marcus helped Fenris to his feet, the great wolf swaying but determined. The creatures pouring through now are just the beginning. If the barrier falls completely, he didn't need to finish. Sarah had seen enough to understand that what they were facing would make the past few days look like a minor inconvenience. There has to be another way, Dr. Chen interjected, looking up from his own readings. Some kind of scientific solution. Science can't fix this, Marcus cut him off, not unkindly. This is older than science, deeper than anything we can measure or quantify. The only thing that matters now is choice. Sarah watched him checking his equipment, the same gear he'd carried on countless rescue missions, now repurposed for something far more dire. What do you need from us? Time, Marcus said simply, and witnesses. Someone needs to remember what really happened here in case. He gestured toward the forest, where the trees were beginning to lean inward, forming an archway of twisted branches. In case I don't make it back to explain. The electromagnetic readings on Sarah's tablet suddenly flatlined, then surged beyond the device's ability to measure. Every piece of electronic equipment in the tent began smoking simultaneously. In the distance, she could hear vehicles refusing to start, radios dying, the modern world grinding to a halt, as something far older reasserted its dominance. It's time, Marcus said, as if responding to a signal only he could hear. Fenris rose beside him, the wolf's amber eyes blazing with the same otherworldly light. Sarah wanted to protest, to find some last-minute solution that wouldn't require this sacrifice. But the screams from town were getting closer, and through the trees she could see shapes that shouldn't exist in any sane universe. Marcus, she called, as he and Fenris approached the forest's edge. He turned back, and for an instant the amber glow in his eyes flickered, revealing the man underneath. Thank you. He nodded once, then stepped into the darkness between the trees. The forest seemed to exhale, welcoming them home. The amber glow in Marcus's eyes flickered like dying embers as he knelt beside Sarah's broken body. Blood pooled beneath her head where it had struck the ancient stone, and her breathing came in shallow, rattling gasps. The wolf creature, Fenris, lay motionless nearby, its massive form already beginning to decompose in the pale morning light, filtering through the canopy. Sarah, stay with me, Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse and entirely human now. The otherworldly resonance that had marked his speech for days was gone, leaving only exhaustion and grief. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with difficulty. Marcus, is that really you? He nodded, tears cutting tracks through the dirt and blood on his cheeks. I'm here. I'm back. The pack. She struggled to speak. Are they gone? All of them. Marcus glanced around the ritual circle, where the battle had raged. Bodies of the wolf creatures littered the ground, their forms already crumbling to dust and bone. The ancient trees that had pulsed with malevolent energy now stood silent, ordinary pines and oaks catching the first rays of dawn. Sarah's hand found his, her grip weak but determined. How did you break free? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, remembering the moment when Fenris had turned on the other creatures, when the Alpha's own will had reasserted itself against the forest's corruption. Love, he said finally. Love was stronger than whatever held us. The sound of helicopters grew louder overhead, and Marcus knew the cavalry was finally arriving. Too late for most of his team, but perhaps not too late for Sarah. He pressed his radio to his lips with shaking fingers. This is Marcus Kane. I need immediate medical evacuation at the stone circle coordinates I'm transmitting. Critical injury, possible internal bleeding. The response came quickly. Professional voices cutting through static, promising help within minutes. Marcus looked down at Sarah, who was watching him with fading eyes. Don't you dare, he told her firmly. Don't you dare leave me after everything we've been through. A weak smile touched her lips. Wouldn't dream of it, boss. The next hours blurred together in a haze of medical personnel, debriefings and questions Marcus couldn't begin to answer honestly. How could he explain that an ancient evil had nested in Blackwood Forest for centuries? How could he describe the sensation of losing his humanity piece by piece, or the terrible clarity that had come with the transformation? Instead, he spoke of getting separated from his team, of surviving in the wilderness while disoriented from a head injury. He described finding Sarah after hearing the sounds of an animal attack. The investigators nodded and took notes, accepting the sanitized version because the truth was too impossible to believe. Sarah survived the helicopter ride to the hospital, underwent emergency surgery, and slowly began the long road to recovery. 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, and internal bleeding that could have killed her, but she lived. The doctors called it miraculous. Marcus visited her every day during her recovery, and gradually they pieced together what had really happened in those final moments. The pack had been preparing some kind of ritual, something that would have spread their influence beyond the forest boundaries. Sarah's intervention had disrupted it at a crucial moment, creating the opening that allowed both Marcus and Fenris to break free of the corruption. "The forest feels different now," Sarah said during one visit, gazing out the hospital window toward the distant tree line. "Quieter." Marcus nodded. He'd felt it too during his one return trip to recover the bodies of their fallen teammates. The oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by the normal sounds of wildlife returning to reclaim their territory. Whatever malevolent presence had dwelled there for so long had finally been purged. They held a memorial service for Chen, Rodriguez, Thompson, and the others who hadn't made it home. Marcus spoke at each funeral, carrying the weight of command decisions that had led good people into darkness. The families deserved better than the classified version of events they received, but the truth would have destroyed them more completely than grief ever could. 6 months later, Marcus submitted his resignation from search and rescue. The forest had given him back his humanity, but it had taken something else in return: his certainty, his ability to sleep through the night without checking locks and shadows. Some experiences marked you permanently, changing the fundamental architecture of who you were. Sarah returned to active duty after her medical leave, but she transferred to a different unit, one that operated far from any deep woods. They kept in touch, united by shared trauma and the knowledge that they had faced something beyond normal human experience and survived. On quiet evenings, Marcus sometimes caught glimpses of amber light in his peripheral vision, brief flickers that vanished when he turned to look directly. He told himself it was just his imagination, his mind's way of processing what it had endured. But deep down, he suspected that some transformations left permanent marks, and that Blackwood Forest would always be part of him now, dormant but never truly gone.